Can you tell us about the importance of being connected?
Connection and having connection is important because it gives you an opportunity to feel support no matter where you are, no matter what you're dealing with. Connection is power because it's information, it's support, it is closeness. That to me is probably the most important thing about connection.
What should someone do in the SMA community to stay connected? I know when they're first diagnosed, they want to research everything, and they may find out things that could be a little overwhelming. Talk us through, dealing with it firsthand when you're first diagnosed, through to maybe when you have a little bit more knowledge, through being connected with someone.
When you're first diagnosed, regardless of whether or not it's with SMA or anything, you almost forget what you've been told, and it becomes a big process of Googling, looking on social media platforms and trying to find information. And of course that information could be dated, it could be different from one country to another, and it can be incredibly scary. So anytime you rely on Dr. Google, you see the worst case scenario and you start to identify and connect with something that is probably not right. So the importance of being connected to somebody in the here and now, and somebody who is going through what you're going through or has recently gone through it and understands your scenario given your circumstances in your country and in your moment of time, that's probably the most powerful and important form of connection, because you've got honesty and you've got reality and you've got somebody who can relate. And I think that that's the most important thing. And I can speak to that from my own diagnosis. I got given a diagnosis, and I call it diagnosed and dumped, because we didn't have insight into what it was. It was just, oh, look, your genetic test has come back and has confirmed you do have SMA. Don't worry about it. We'll just monitor you for progression. Looking online and looking at SMA, it was terrifying, because the information was about death, it was about fear, it was about what you would lose, and then there was the confusion around access to treatments and access to different clinical data and access to or even different terminology. You'd hear about pulmonologists, which in one country they call them a pulmonologist, and then in another country they're called, maybe they're a respiratory physician. So you're trying to get your head around too much and not relevant information.
How connected should you be in those first sort of months of diagnosis, and where should you be getting information, sourcing information from for that connectivity?
For me, connection at the beginning, in terms of post-diagnosis or initial diagnosis, you need to tread very carefully, because you're, in particular with SMA, you don't know necessarily enough about what you're dealing with. You don't know who the right people are to go to. You don't know someone's circumstances. I think ideally you should be looking for a local community, so that you've got people who are in a similar sort of situation from a geographical or demographic perspective, but don't take everything as gospel. Try and find someone that you can relate to and information that would seem more accurate to where you are placed at that moment in time. And what I mean by that is, you can't look too far offshore where somebody has a different set of circumstances and different resources available to them, and you can't look necessarily to just maybe just your doctor, because your doctor isn't going to necessarily be experiencing the emotional piece. So you've got to look at what it is that you want and what you need, but take your time with it and don't rush, because the more you rush, the more likely you're going to uncover too much information that you can't process at once. So just take it step by step. The neurologist at First Point, I think, is a really good source of information, because they are trained to deliver it in a certain way while taking into consideration the emotion that might come, and taking into consideration the facts that you need to know and where you're at on your diagnosis journey, because it's obviously not just a diagnosis. Here you are, this many copies of SMN2 gene, and this is what the prognosis is. There's a lot more to uncover post-diagnosis in terms of where your strength is at, what your treatment options are. So I think it's a slow process that shouldn't be rushed. And when you're ready for that next layer, then seek that support. Don't try and do it all at once. That would be my advice, because the more you seek, sometimes you find out too much.
So we've been in the realm of SMA for a little while now, and you're becoming more connected with the local community. At what point do you start connecting with, say, international or, much more the broader community of SMA?
So the connectivity journey, I think, is very individualised. So I know some people who, to be honest, I call them my SMA whānau, which is whānau is family in New Zealand or in Māori. And there are some that I'm incredibly connected with. And then there are others who, we might have a conversation once a month, once a year, and that's up to them, because I think connectivity is what you want in return. It's a two-way street, but if somebody is not up for that much closeness, you're not going to force them to do that. So it's about what's right for both parties. I think, if you want the international perspective, there's amazing conferences you can go to. There are amazing specialists you can seek out. There are researchers that you can follow. The connectivity piece is limitless, especially with social media and the digital era. So it is easy to access those connections if you want them. But I think it's very much a personalised journey, and what is right for you, but also what's right for your loved ones. So you do see a lot of families that connect because they want to see their kids being around others who are going through something similar, but sometimes a member in the family isn't quite ready to explore that. And I think you need to be mindful and just respectful of each person in that family unit is going through something very unique to them, and they need to feel supported and understood as well.
So there's many ways to stay connected. What is, I guess, the biggest forum at the moment could be Facebook. What are other ways other than social media to stay connected to a community, an SMA community?
So Facebook's a great a way of staying connected. There's a number of groups that you can be a part of, whether or not it's local, regional, national, international, whether or not it's based on your type, based on the treatment that you've got access to, whether or not it's adults, pediatrics. There's a whole range of different groups that you can be a part of on Facebook, which I do think is great, but there are certainly other ways to connect. I know for me, I'm very interested in the Asia Pacific region, because there's a lot of other countries that are in the same places as what I am in New Zealand, and it's also great to have people like Julie at SMA Australia, where I'm able to go to her for information, where their landscape of or your landscape of options is much broader than what we have access to, so it's great to learn. So with some communities it's via WhatsApp, because you start to form those connections. What I have found is that the more people that you meet, the more connected you become. What I really like in Australia, I've seen the app, which is great because it's broken down where you can meet different people, but it has different areas of specialisation in there, or different areas in terms of the condition. There's an area for adults, there's an area for children, there's an area for diagnosis, there's an area for grief, there's a bunch of areas, so you could almost self-select. And the advantage of that is over the likes of Facebook is if you're going for a particular piece of information, you can go directly to that information, as opposed to maybe seeing some of the things that you would see on those social media platforms that maybe you're not quite ready for, or you're not prepared to see, because Facebook is relatively uncontrolled, and there are some things that would be quite devastating or hurtful. I know for me, a lot of the families in New Zealand really celebrate the fact that others are able to access treatment, but it can also be incredibly hurtful and impactful on their well-being when they see and are reminded that they or their loved one can't get access. So if you're looking for just a snippet of information, the app is quite good in that it's broken down into those different sections so you can self-select. Privacy is really important because you shouldn't feel you have to give information to get information, and I think that that's the beauty of connectivity, where I like to think that if you are connected to someone and you need help and you've got the right connection and a meaningful connection, you can do that without having to disclose too much or give too much, because I think when you're dealing with something like SMA, you're already dealing with enough without feeling that you have to do more to get something back.
How do people connect within the app, within the SMA Australia app?
If you're looking to connect to in the app, in the SMA Australia app, there's a really neat feature that I saw where you can pin yourself to your location, so you can literally see any moment in time in your area who else is in that area that you could potentially connect with, which is great. So it's not just where you might live. It could also be perhaps you've got family that is in a different region. When you're there, you can actually see if there are other families that you can connect with if you're on holiday or taking a break or what have you.
How important is it to connect with someone face to face?
For me, the face-to-face connection is the biggest, and I've missed that a lot, obviously with the COVID era that we are in. I've been very fortunate to attend 2 conferences in the USA, and I was really looking forward to coming across to Australia for your big conference, but unfortunately that just wasn't able to happen this time. But the face-to-face connection is just so important, because what you're dealing with, and connection is a human thing. We all want to feel connected, and you don't necessarily have to feel connected by having the same disease or the same genetic breakdown. Connection is about understanding, it's about relationships, it's about compassion, it's about networks. It's connection is connection, and I think that seeing somebody face to face and really engaging, you're able to identify, is this somebody that you form that really genuine, meaningful connection with? And you pick up on body language, you're able to have a laugh. I've really missed that over the COVID period, and in particular because our SMA community is a very vulnerable community, and it's difficult not having that social interaction. Having SMA myself, I'm a very connected person. I'm very extroverted. I like to be around people, and I have some of my best friends I have met through the SMA community, and it's been enriching for me because I've learned so much, and I'd like to think that I've offered something to others as well. But ultimately it's genuine friendships where people can understand what I'm going through, but they can also understand a little bit of why the advocacy piece is important to me, because that's probably my biggest thing for connection is having meaningful relationships with people that I care about, that I want to support moving forward.